Last session of the conference. Appreciate you guys all sticking around. Matter of fact, we talked to Ron a minute ago about a quick bio break, and he said, "No, lock the doors. We're going to plow on through." So I see people escaping, Ron. You better get them back in here.
Lock the doors.
Very, very excited about who we have on the panel today and this topic. We've talked and heard a lot about the utility side of the house. We've got two energy majors doing some very innovative things, investing a lot of capital in new services, new opportunities to bring to market to address key areas of decarbonization and decentralization and this other third word, digitalization. So we want to talk a lot about that. By way of format, I'll start off with a quick introduction, just introducing the roles. We're going to jump into something a little bit different, a 2 to 3 minute video that each of these firms have provided. Give us a bit of perspective on their new focus around clean energy transition. And then we'll dive into a series of topics, as Ron just talked about, topics that I think you'll find very interesting around sustainability, but it's very specific around energy as a service, around new products and services, reliability, resiliency, how do we bring new capabilities to market, some of their challenges now and what they see in the future. So we'll talk about those things as well. So starting with introductions, myself, Mike Bianco, as Ron said, Managing Director at Navigant, now a Guidehouse company. I am working out of our Austin, Texas office. My focus is energy systems transformation. So what that really means is working with our clients. I've got 700 close consultants and colleagues that I work with globally. We work with utilities and large industrial clients globally to really start to move away from just strategy, but how do we move that into program management, program planning, and execution? What do the changes look like to deliver all these wonderful capabilities and technologies we're talking about? Sitting to my right to start with is Ken Cowan. Ken is Vice President of Solution Sales and Marketing at ENGIE in North America. He's responsible for developing and bringing to market to his clients, very specifically, leading-edge integrated solutions. And he's going to talk a bit about this energy as a service concept as well. Full lifecycle services, though, from supply and management into distributed energy services, analytics, and optimization. Appreciate you being here, Ken.
Thank you.
And then to his right is Eric Bradley, Global GM for Shell New Energies. He leads the Connected Energy Division and is responsible for growing global solutions focused on delivering cleaner, more resilient distributed energy services to communities, commercial industrial clients, and cities globally. And appreciate you being here as well. I know with the end of the year, everybody's got to push, so this time is valuable for all of us. Both these gentlemen bring very rich and robust histories, 25 plus years experience, as I understand. We'll give them a chance to talk about that a little bit more. So very exciting about the perspective of the changes that have gone on in the industry, but more important as we look forward, where they're placing their bets today, and then what that crystal ball looks like over the next 5 and 10 years of this clean energy transition. So we'll talk about those things. Coincidentally, Eric and Ken are good friends. They worked together at ENGIE for several years, so that'll add a bit of a dynamic to it as well, I'm sure. Let's kick off with the videos, if we might. Some things that we see here that we probably wouldn't have seen 10 years ago, that's for sure. Let's take it down a level. But by the way, I do want to save like 3 to 5 minutes at the end for questions from the audience, so please jot down questions as we go through this. Let's take it down a level and get a little bit more tactical for context around your roles and your priorities to help achieve some of these goals. Would you like to start, Ken?
Sure, Mike. And thank you for hosting us here. This is a great venue to talk about some of the things that we're all doing. But ENGIE, the transformation over the last few years has been amazing. And as mentioned in the video, we've transformed literally from selling most of our fossil fuel fleet to transitioning to renewable energy services and resiliency. And so to make that move from where we are to where we are today, and focusing on the customer centricity side of it is really the focus of where ENGIE is today. So this transformation has been enormous over a number of acquisitions over the last 3 years, but it's been great. But obviously, as I've heard today, that entire transition from renewables to energy services to customer centricity are the pillars of what ENGIE is focused on today.
Sounds great. Eric, would you like to jump in?
Sure. So I'm Eric Bradley. I'm with Shell New Energies, which is a relatively new division within Shell, and then my division is also one of the newer divisions. Actually, what's driven a lot of what you're seeing by Shell is if you go out onto our website, the Sky scenario that we published about 3 years ago. And part of that was working with the Rocky Mountain Institute to identify what would it take to do decarbonization and meet the Paris goals. And when you look at those scenarios, you come away saying electrification is part of decarbonization. So a lot of what you're seeing us do in the market now is building capabilities around how to electrify things that traditionally haven't been electrified. And a lot of people don't know, but in the US and in other parts of the world, Shell has already been in the power business. We're one of the largest power traders and marketers. We operate and dispatch a fleet of 10,000 megawatts of generation, which from an integrated utility perspective is small, but from a power trading perspective is large. And we also serve a lot of end customers, traditionally from supply. So we take what we already have, and we're going to be building out new capabilities. In my particular division, we cover behind the meter, and I know on the panel earlier there was talk about the behind the meter solution for the customer. Well, there's two customers in our view. The customer is the end user, and the end user needs affordable energy, which has always been there, reliable and resilient, which is becoming a big issue for parts of the country in the US, and then clean, which is becoming more and more important. So that's one customer set. And then, of course, there's the grid operator. And so from our power trading experience, we know that keeping the grid operating is a pretty significant undertaking. And so having these assets in a distributed way can allow us to serve the utility as well. The panel earlier had also talked about the utility owning this equipment. I actually believe the competitive markets can do this and serve the utility as a solution provider. I think it's a quicker way to adopt into the market. It requires policy support. It requires utility support. But if we really want to move this system and start decarbonizing, we have to have the competitive sector, the utility sector, and the policymakers working together.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense, makes sense. Thank you. There's a tremendous amount of focus and momentum around sustainability journeys, driving decarbonization through the supply chain. I've read that Shell is actually tying executive level compensation to some level to achieving sustainability targets. Talk to us a little bit about why that's important to Shell.
Well, I think, you could always be accused of greenwashing, and I think they wanted to put executive compensation tied to our actions. So, we've said we're investing $1 to $2 billion a year, and that could go up as we find opportunities and as society wants to adopt the energy transition. But we also wanted to do what we say we're doing. So we said we are going to bring our net carbon footprint reductions down in line with the Paris Accord. So that's a 50% reduction by 2050, and the executive compensation is tied to that as a way of demonstrating that we're serious about doing this.
Excellent, excellent. Ken, would you like to address that?
Yeah, actually, over the last 3 years at ENGIE, we transitioned obviously to a renewable energy platform, and over the next 3 years, we plan to invest $12 billion into energy infrastructure, of which $1 billion of that was a press release that we announced yesterday with our 50-year concession with the University of Iowa, which is really optimizing and operating their entire energy infrastructure for the next 50 years, similar to the one that we did with Ohio State a few years ago, which also was another $1 billion investment into the Ohio State University. In addition to that, over the next 3 years, we're planning to increase our renewable platform up to 9 gigawatts, of which 2 gigawatts of that will be North American. So clearly our focus is on renewable energy and strategy. And the team that I lead, the solution sales team, was created specifically because of that. The fact that over the last 3 years, we made a number of acquisitions, close to $8 billion of acquisitions, and continue to grow. And that focus is really on providing services, the renewable energy platform, and sustainability and resiliency to our customers. So really that entire transition is, not only saying that you're going to do it, but how do you walk the talk, and how do you put your money where your mouth is when you're really transitioning into a zero carbon transition mode.
You guys are really going after the colleges. I love it. My son's a junior at A&M, so when you get ready to talk to College Station, let me know.
Yeah, we're talking.
To
and the thing on that, Mike, is
tell me.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to see that, and this was mentioned earlier, is that this is being driven by the students. They are really focused on a sustainable campus. They're making decisions, they're making choices where they go to school based on sustainability commitments. They're looking at companies who invest into their colleges' campuses on their portfolio, which is important for ENGIE to have, to transition as they have. But again, this is the constituents that are leading these efforts are driving some of the changes that we're seeing in the market.
Excellent, excellent. So both firms are investing tremendous amounts of capital. You mentioned $8, $10, $12 billion. You know, we're reading $2 billion a year committed by Shell New Energies in this area of clean tech, innovation, new grid services, resiliency. Without giving away your trade secrets, talk to us a bit about your overall strategy, where you're placing your bets and why.
Yeah, I think we first take the view of where do we think decarbonization and energy transition will happen, and then from our perspective, we look at where are we strong in the value chain and across the different ways to deliver energy, and start building the capabilities around our existing customer relationships. So we, through our traditional businesses, serve a lot of customers, commercial, industrial, consumers through the retail outlets, and then look at where our advantages are and start to build out that way. And we do it through venture investments, which is a way to see the cutting edge technology and business models that maybe a larger company can't adopt. And then we take traditional investments that are some of the announcements we've made in the last 6 months, ERM in Australia, First Utility and Hudson in the UK. So we'll continue to build both existing businesses where we think we can add value and supplement with venture investment, and then just inside developments that we do as well.
Excellent, excellent. You want to talk a little bit more about those investments?
Similar, Eric. I think in our case, obviously, you start with your existing base, your existing customer base, which we have done. But how do you then transition that to grow and build stronger relationships and build the capital investment that we want to do with our existing customers? So in the case of ENGIE, obviously our goal is to deploy capital. And many of those conversations start with those that we do business with. So we've transitioned from a product-oriented company to what we call a product cross-sell, upsell, solution sell model, of which we ultimately should grow from that existing relationship to become more integrated and more coordinated in our approach to providing a consultative approach to selling, so that our customers are having a deeper conversation about solutions that they may not see right in front of them. So
yeah, I wanted to ask more about that, because we've heard a lot and continue to hear a lot about customer centricity, customer engagement, diversity of customer needs across C&I and into residential and communities and cities. How do you bring all that together to bring that into a portfolio and help that drive your M&A, your investments?
Well, first I'd say I totally agree with what Ken laid out. I think to say first, what's driving the integration and the upselling? And I think when you look at, again, going back to the prior conversation, when you look at the complexity of what's being installed, bulk scale, renewables, and behind the meter, and you look at the computing capabilities and how that's been coming down, and the ability to sense everything, I think for most customers it's becoming intractable. Yeah. They just don't understand it. Mm-hmm. And then when you put in the cost declines of solar and wind and battery, you get lots of people coming in front of clients with the bright shiny objects. Mm-hmm. Here's my kit, here's my software package. Mm-hmm. I think it's getting to the point now where clients are just saying, I have no idea what to do. I know what I want, I know what my outcome is, but I don't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. And I think that offers companies like an ENGIE and a Shell to come in and bundle all these things together. So when we think about acquisitions, we think about how do we bolt on another acquisition that's tied to offering an end solution to the customer. And I think all of the details of what goes on behind the grid and locational marginal pricing and all of that, most clients, except for maybe really large industrials, could care less and they have no interest in it. But that complexity can be covered by the company that's providing the end service. So we think about how do we provide that sophisticated solution to the customer, but shield them from all the complexity behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So real focus on integration of new technologies and services to drive new capabilities, and certainly challenges. You got to play a bit of solution architect,
right?
On
That's right.
How to address those complexities. Let's talk a little bit about partnerships and where they fit in, because I think that's a big part as well as you look at a much broader ecosystem of players. Partners, competitors become partners, end users become producers. Yeah, talk to us a little bit about partners. Maybe you start, Ken.
Yeah, and actually, some of our partners have been part of, and now become part of ENGIE over the last years. And what we've done, as I mentioned, we've acquired, made a number of acquisitions over the last year, and many of these companies were partners, or even in some cases competitors. But the key there is it takes multiple relationships sometimes in an organization to reach the right folks, but also multiple services to be able to bring to bear to the customer. And in many cases, that requires a partner to do that. The one thing I did mention is ENGIE's transition over the last 3 years. We have made a number of acquisitions, and part of that, the opportunity there is to be able to have a broader space to work with and to solve our customers' concerns and their solutions. The challenges there is having multiple cultures within an organization, and in transitioning that into one ENGIE or one Shell. The key is the fact that you have sometimes a siloed approach, and part of one of the mandates that we have now at ENGIE is just really bringing all that together, is to have a culture that has actually integrated all of the different acquisitions that we made over the last 3 years. But it's both an opportunity and a challenge. But again, it's to your point, some of your partners, in our case, have actually become part of the ENGIE family.
Makes sense. Like talk about partnerships?
Yeah, I think we think about partnerships from there's financial, and there is a lot of capital out in the market now that is looking to deploy for renewable or clean goals. So we think about financial partnerships, technology partnerships where we don't necessarily want to own that part of the value chain, delivery partnerships, so mechanical services, actual delivery partners. Where we tend not to partner is going to be on the customer intimacy, having the direct relationship with the customer, which we think is important as we evolve with the customer, and then having the partnerships behind to actually do the delivery is important. I would agree with Ken. It's and having lived some of that integration, and we have the same thing at Shell, is being able to bring in different partners or even different companies to integrate together. It's an ongoing journey, and it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And it comes down to, I think you have to be really clear about where do you think the combinations of things that you can offer to different segments of customers are. So if I'm serving a large industrial facility versus serving a quick serve restaurant, those are two very different needs. And to bring the right pieces together and align the organization around that, that's the trick. How do you do that in an efficient way?
Put you on the spot a little bit, if I can, guys, in terms of utilities. We talk about partners. Utility can play a partner role, a customer role, a competitor role. Where do you see them in this value chain?
I do see them as a partner. In many cases, they have access to clients that we may not have access to. They've built that trust. They're in their homes checking meters, so there's an intimacy there that we would never have. Is how do you leverage that? But at the same time, there's services or solutions that we have access to that they don't. How do you bridge that together? Is it white labeling a product that we have through the utility? Is there a off-site renewable opportunity that we could sell to the utility, who can then in turn sell to their customer? So I think there's room for partnerships. Again, the one thing the utilities have in many cases is that customer intimacy, that relationship that ENGIE or someone else may never have. But at the same time, there's a breadth and depth of services and a reach maybe in other areas that are not served by that utility, that they may have customers within their own utility that have sites in other parts of the U.S. that they can't get to, but we can. So there's just different ways to be creative and innovative of how to partner, But absolutely, I think there's definitely room for partnership
Tackling it
there.
as a broader ecosystem of
Absolutely.
capabilities. Makes good sense.
Absolutely.
Your thoughts, Eric?
No, I agree, and I reflect back probably 3-4 years ago, there were, and I won't name the companies, but I think there were companies in the startup space that went into I call it the scorched earth mode, which was, it was either the utility or it was them. And I don't think that worked out very well for either. So I think there's an absolutely important role for the utility going forward. And I think, maintaining a stable system and having the connectivity between the large scale and the behind the meter is going to be important. Having the ability to service that is important. And I think it coexists with the competitive markets. So I think it's very symbiotic going forward. We have relationships with utilities that we work with on a number of fronts, and we expect to do that going forward. So I don't see it as being adversarial.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Shell has a very successful petroleum-based business, very profitable. As you move to decarb and make green your own organization and your customers, and bring these new green tech kind of clean tech solutions to market, one perspective is you might be cannibalizing your own profits, right? Yeah. So how do you balance that shareholder view with society and kind of where society is taking this?
Yeah, we want to work with society. I think there's a lot of talk in the press about it's what the energy companies should be doing, but it's the consumer as well, and it's a combination of what the consumer is willing to offer with the companies, with the policymakers. It's not just one segment here to make this happen. So I think the way we view it as we want to work with society, we want to work with the policymakers, and as fast as they want to move, we're going to bring the technical solutions. There are a lot of technical solutions out there that we can offer, they're just not cost competitive. And that's the challenge. If society wants to get it now, there are things we can do now. Our job should be to push the technology, and we have a lot of R&D in that area. But it's also to work to define the policies and to push consumers in an area that we think makes sense, in a direction that we think makes sense. So I think having the existing business provides enormous capability for us to invest and redeploy over time into these new areas of the energy transition.
We've talked and have grown over the last 20 years in cloud technologies and as a service capabilities, depending on how you look at the spectrum. And I know, Ken, you and your team are doing a lot of work in this energy as a service. Want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's been a journey, but what we're seeing is that many of our customers are not energy professionals. They rather stick to their core competencies, whether that's running a university or a hospital or a major food and beverage manufacturing facility. They've grown up kind of in this energy industry by happenstance because that's kind of where they ended up. But now, as complicated and as integrated as it is, it shouldn't take away from their core business. And that's been obviously the case with some of what we've heard with some of the universities, is that they want to focus on research, student academics, and this really innovative and training the next generation, not running a power plant. So how do you simplify that for them? How do you make that easy for them? How do you allow them to really focus on what they do, and in this case, outsource their energy side to a group that does that on a regular basis? So this whole energy as a service concept is really is allowing many of those who want to focus strictly on their core competency to lay that risk off to a third party in which they're operating, maintaining, optimizing, setting clear targets on expectations, and also allowing them to reach sustainability goals that they have in the future. How do they achieve that without having to take on all the risk? So the energy as a service is what we're seeing as the term is loosely used out there in many cases and sometimes not well defined, but really laying off that risk, being able to start off an energy transition quickly and allowing them to focus on what they do best.
Makes a lot of sense.
And I would just add to that, I think, this concept is not new. If you look back, 30 years ago, people started to outsource computing. They outsourced real estate. And so I think what the universities and the public sector is looking at and saying, do I really want to have capital tied up in something that's non-core for my mission.
Absolutely.
So this is an opportunity, and then with all of the advances in software and the complexity around, do I put solar, or do I do wind, do I put a battery in? It makes it now as a good opportunity to start doing the as-a-service model.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. So tremendous amount of progress over the last 5 years, getting us to levels that I don't think we even anticipated 10, 15 years ago in terms of reduction of cost of these technologies, the ability to integrate them and actually bring new solutions to market. What do you see in terms of obstacles for the next 5 years? What's keeping you up at night, if you will?
I think contracting. I think contracting with the customer, I mean, if you really want to move quickly, you've got to standardize.
That's true.
You have to standardize, you've got to, and I keep talking about, you've got to get the customer, the policymakers, and the providers of the service have to be aligned around the speed, and then the standardization is important. And I think we're finding in some markets that the standardization is not there. It could be things as simple as interconnects. How do you get the interconnect to the contracting that works in one market that doesn't work in another? It could be with a large corporate client. They have their policies where they need to go out and competitively bid. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's when you start to add in all of these kind of frictions in the process of changing, that's what slows things down. So how do you improve the process of getting things done?
Standardization.
And standardization
Makes
as
a lot
well.
of sense.
I agree with Eric on that. Is it really the tables are starting to turn to where the utilities aren't driving customers. Customers are starting to drive the utilities now. I mean, the customer with technology, with the speed of disruption, you look at what Airbnb has done to the hotel industry and what Uber has done to taxis. Customers are starting to gain control over their usage, and decentralization is starting to take hold. So you're starting to see the customers expecting more and expecting simpler contracts. To do a virtual PPA was 15, 20-year deals. You're seeing contracts now to where you're seeing renewable projects rolled into retail contracts, and they're 2 to 3 years, and it's done simply on a 3-page agreement versus 50. So customers the clients are driving the change, and so the question is for the ENGIEs of the world, and how quickly can you keep up with that? How are you going to be able to meet the customer where they are?
Yep, no, good, I appreciate that. A couple more questions, and we'll turn it over to the audience. Coming out of Puerto Rico the last couple of years, I've been out there with the team supporting developing a more modern plan and working with FEMA and damage assessments and project definitions, and how do we drive resiliency into this system for the future, as well as cleaner energy sources and distributed, those types of things. But resiliency is a key theme, right? We're seeing a lot of focus around that with a much more frequent and much larger, impactful catastrophic storms, wildfires, ice storms, tornadoes.
Yep.
I know those are key themes for your guys' services as well. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing in that space and how you see that coming together.
You go for it.
So in Puerto Rico, we purchased a company called Sonnen, a German battery manufacturer, and they have a proprietary chemistry which is pretty safe. So it's very very appropriate in a consumer setting, and they also have software that allows you to aggregate the batteries and provide a grid service. So we've been in Puerto Rico providing batteries on a smaller scale, but we are also looking at can we start to provide on a much larger scale, not necessarily in Puerto Rico, but take the batteries and start to aggregate them up and then serve them to the distribution operator. Doing the same thing in Utah as well with an innovative offer that we did with an apartment complex. So I think that's one of the big ones that we're working through is how do we offer that through to the utility through the battery systems that we have.
Yep. How about on your side, Ken? I
Yeah.
know that microgrids, community scale microgrids are capabilities you guys are looking at.
It's huge, and then obviously what we're seeing in Northern California, that's part of the conversation that's being had. But it's twofold. One is there's obviously a need, but then secondly, how do you make it economical to do that, and how do you get speed to market? How do you get it in place? So the key there is resiliency is critical. Obviously, with some of the stuff that we're seeing on the higher ed side, as well as healthcare, And in case of natural disasters, how do you be able to provide that? We've had conversations on how to expedite that, what incentives are in play to move that quickly, but it's a core part, and storage is critical for that.
Yeah, no, I know that weighs on all of us in the industry. You know, how can we apply technologies? How do we get better forewarning systems and recover more quickly and build, you know, the restoration around those issues? One more question, then I'll turn it over. If we pull out our crystal ball, so you guys, long storied careers, you know, 2.5, 3 decades, you've seen a lot of change, the last 5 years of a lot of disruption. What's the next 5 to 10 years look like from your perspectives?
Well, it's tough. I mean, when I look back just the last five, the changes that have taken place, I absolutely believe software will continue to drive. And again, going back to the prior panel, I think the software innovation, the computing innovation is going to continue to drive possibilities around equipment and a service that just didn't exist in the future. So I think going back to the energy as a service, I think it's going to become more and more real, enabled by software.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. We're working with a lot of utility clients, and when we're helping them understand, you can no longer just integrate off the shelf, right? You need software development capabilities in-house to make all these things stand up and dance. Yep. So it's interesting times.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Ken?
I think that customers are going to drive the rate of change. I think existing infrastructure, regardless of where it's at, I think innovative and creative ideas are going to create the next solutions on how to navigate around that. And again, I go back to the disruption that we've seen on some of the things that we use, every day, Uber, how that existing infrastructure is still there, but how the whole market has completely changed. And I think that's going to be the way we see energy as we use it, that technology is going to drive every aspect of use given the current infrastructure, and that we, as giants in the industry, are going to have to be able to quickly respond and be very agile and nimble to do that.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Questions in the audience? Yes, sir.
Completely agree with the assessment that the customer is going to drive change as well as data analytics. When you are moving towards this energy as a service model that I think is the future, where are you going to do it? In deregulated markets or regulated markets, where if you're a service provider, you might just be regulated as a public utility?
I think you can do it in both.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can do it in both. In the 2 cases we've done major deals, Ohio State University and University of Iowa. Ohio State's deregulated, and University of Iowa's in a regulated area. So the key there is just a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the on-site capabilities still can be done. I mean, there's so much work that needs to be done there. Obviously, the cherry on top is to be able to do that in a deregulated market as well. But I think it will be and can be done in both.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the innovations that you're seeing in the energy as a service are within communities and networks around the country, private wire networks, and the communities are simply saying, I mean, we have a joint venture that we launched in Texas earlier this year called EcoSmart Solution. And we provide decarbonized heating, cooling, and power within a private community that is served by a co-op. And so we're doing all of this because this is what the community wants. It's a master plan community, and we're selling a net zero capable community that people want that's not being provided in the market. And we're able to do it at scale without the utility. Now, the utility will become part of that. They are supplying residual power into the system. But you're seeing it in Texas, you're seeing it in California, and I think that's the thing you can't miss, is this is where the revolution's occurring. It's inside the premise on the competitive side of the meter.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Hey, I'm a reporter with Business Insider, and I was hoping you guys could talk a little about what jobs look like at your respective corporations as you transition to providing new services. Like, are you seeing jobs lost, and are you offering retraining programs for employees that typically work on petroleum-based, for example, industries? I'm just curious how that's changing.
Very good question.
Yeah. So at least in terms of what I see jobs in the future and where the demand is now, certainly people with software data science capabilities is one. I think people with systems engineering expertise. And then most importantly, I think is people who know how to sell a package and who know how to work within a complex organization with complex solutions. So I think integrators, people who have integration skills that can bring technical and soft skills together. And I think to me, that'll be AI proof, is the people that have those integrative skills. For our particular company, we have hired into New Energies a lot of people that were formerly in the upstream. In fact, I get emails every day from people who are interested in our business. And so there are opportunities for people to retool and retrain. I think longer term that'll be a question for people to get that training internally and externally, and then look for these opportunities as the market grows.
I agree with Derek on that. It's been growing more so than I thought. I mean, just like you, I talk to a lot of folks, but what I also see is that the next generation of leaders within our industry are eager. I mean, we do a lot of training with MBA programs throughout the U.S. We have an internship program with high schools where we share what's happening from a sustainability standpoint and what we're doing and how we're doing it. And that generation is eager to learn about this and well prepared to come into an ever-changing, quickly changing market.
Mission-driven, expects change, will not sit by and watch organizations not move.
Yeah. I get a sense these gentlemen could easily go for another hour if you had the time. We are out of time. You want to wrap us up, Ron? Or?
I do. Thank you, gentlemen.
How about a quick applause for these guys?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.